Hey guys, this is White Manga here with a new video on drawing female body proportions. Real quick, one of the sponsors of this channel is Akibento. They're basically an anime subscription box that sends out anime and manga related products monthly with a lot of exclusive items made by them alone. It basically costs $20.95 plus shipping for the first month if you use the coupon code ANIME at checkout. The items in the box are worth, $60 and above, guaranteed, with an exclusive t-shirt and pin every month. So yeah, check them out, and you can see me opening my first box and seeing all the cool stuff that are in it. Now this month's theme is called Restart, and I take it that each box for each month would have its own theme. So guys, don't forget to check out Akibento. They sent me this cool stuff, and I really appreciate it. Now let's get into the video. So starting off in this video, you can see I have these numbers on the side, and I'm going to kind of use that as a guide to draw the human body for the female in this case. Now, those numbers on the left don't particularly, state the actual height of the character. Those aren't like the inches of the actual character, but you can almost think of them as a ratio, because I'm going to be drawing the female body at 4 different stages of life. So I'm going to start from a 5-year-old kind of body type. So around that age, not exactly 5-year-old, but maybe 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, and then I'll do like a 10, something around 10 years old. Then I'll move to 15, and then 20. So here you can see I've drawn the head, and the head I've usually, in this case, for most of these, will always take at least 1 inch. And that's what once you compare it to the ruler on the left, you see what I mean. And then with the human body, almost has this hourglass for a female, like a typical female look. It has the hourglass look, in the torso area. And you can see at the top, I have the chest and the neck occupy 1 inch. Then I have the hourglass side of things take on another inch, going from 2 to 3. And then from there, I kind of bring everything back together. So the legs, I kind of have the legs from that waist area to the knee take up 2 inches. And as you can see, I'll be using these guidelines to put together the body. And then when I draw the other ages, it's almost like I'm just using the guidelines to gauge and compare the characters to one another. So even though it goes from 0 at the top to 7 at the bottom, this character is not necessarily 7 foot tall, 7 inches, or anything like that. This is just, you can just think of them as a guidelines, ratio styled kind of thing, where I'm just using it to guide myself, putting the body together and making sure the proportions are correct with regards to each part of the human body. Now, generally, one of the things that I learned, things that I've heard a lot of, is that the head is kind of like about seven times the body, or 7.5 times the body, and sometimes 6. Obviously this varies depending on the character itself, depending on your art style. There are several factors, but those are usually kind of like the foundation standards that at least I hear a lot, especially the 7.5. But that's not always the case. Again, depending on your style, I've seen people draw things where the head is like probably 10 times the rest of the body in height. And that's what I'm talking about. But here I always made sure to give it 1 inch with regards to the ruler on the left. And instead of 7.5, I'm stopping at 7. Also, the hip, at the part where the hourglass and the torso area kind of goes in and out, I'm kind of gauging from, say, a 2 point. You can think of it as a 2.3. Again, I'm just using that ruler. Also, kind of helps you guys follow me a whole lot easier. And just in case you don't get it, is starting from 0 at the top to 7 at the bottom. And you can see there's still like a 7.5 below that, but I don't use that here. It's just me kind of harping back to what I was talking about, with sometimes the height of the head is 7.5 times the rest of the body, or sometimes 6. Again, it varies depending on your character. The proportions always depend on your style. You see characters like, for instance, Popeyes. His hands don't make any sense, right? But that's the style of it, So, but you just want to keep that consistency, or at least when you're drawing Popeye. So here, I've drawn all of that. When I'm doing hands, I always try to make sure that the fist is actually below the waist. Once I have that below the waist, and I know where the shoulder starts, I just figure out where the elbow is going to be. It's almost around halfway, depending on if the arm is bending a little bit, if the hand is kind of bending a little bit. And then once I figure out what the elbows are, I gauge and make sure both hands are kind of like equal height. Both elbows are like of similar height, and then you just use lines to put it together. And if you feel that I'm going through everything a little faster, a little too fast, again, you'll see me do everything. And here, I'm just using circles, oval shapes, and straight lines to kind of get the foundation of this body. And then, after everything, I can then add more details to the character to flesh it out and make it feel more like a character. Here, it kind of looks like a basic bland mannequin, almost like a creation model in a video game that you start adding things or putting things onto. So here, for the breasts, I just have like 2 circles. Again, after, you can then go in with more details and make everything feel a whole lot more organic and less like regular sketch circles and straight lines. Going back to the knee, you can see here, and the age here is for like ages around 20, your adult stage, so around 20 and above. You know, you don't really get that much taller after this anyway. So this is, you know, again, this is like your typical female look. And then, you know, here now I'm just going in with more details, adding in fingers and things like that. For the beginning part where I'm just getting the proportions right and the sizes of the thighs, legs, head, and all of that, just making sure everything is all right, and then I can go afterwards by putting in details. If you're getting lost, don't worry, I'll do more with the other ages, and you'll be able to see a whole lot better what I'm talking about. Going again where you have the knees at number 5, and like I said, from like the waist to the knees, I kind of use 2 inches based off of the ruler on the left of the page. And then I kind of do that again, 2 inches from the knee to the bottom of, like from the knee to the ground, right? And then you put, you know, you make sure you design her feet and things like that. Generally, females don't have big feet. They generally have smaller feet. But again, one thing you need to keep in mind when you're doing these kind of drawings, any kind of drawings, like I've always said, you need to keep in mind your style, and you know what you're going for, and consistency, and all those kind of things, because nothing is set in stone. So if your female character had big feet, then she would have big feet. Or if the characters in your style, you know, had a certain aesthetic about them, you may want to think about having that consistency. So here, the same thing. The head, at least for these ages, it only gets a little trickier when maybe you're drawing like a baby or things like that. But generally, for the ages I'm going to draw, I'm going to have, and for this style, specifically my style, and that's another thing you need to keep in mind, that this is kind of like my style, the foundation I'm presenting to you guys, that maybe you guys can follow, apply to your art styles, and see if it works. So for here, the heads, the height of the heads, while they have that typical oval shape, the older character has a little more defined face, a little more chiseled jaw, but the jaw gets a little more round the younger the character gets in this particular style. And you see something similar happen when I'm drawing the eyes, where the eyes are a little more defined, but as it gets younger, the eyes are bigger. And for those of you who are familiar with mainstream comics, mainstream manga, it's not unfamiliar to you. So here you have the head, take 1 inch. Now I'm kind of coming up with different rules for how I'm doing the hourglass hip. Again, depends on your character. Your character might not even have like that much of hips, so the hourglass might not go in that much. So again, you're keeping in mind who the character is when you're doing these things. And you can add more flesh or make the character skinnier depending on, you know, how much the character weighed. Stretch things out depending on how tall the character is. So maybe a character looks tall even though they might not be even close to anything that you can compare the height to truly see how tall they are. It all depends on what you want to do. So here, real quick, once you have that foundation and the guidelines at the side, it can really help you put things together. And here, for the hips, again, with the hand, I always make sure that the fist is below the waist. At least the palm area is below the waist. And then I know where the shoulders are. And again, the younger the character, and both for like females and males, I always make sure the shoulders are not too wide. So the younger the character, I like to keep the shoulders not too broad and keep them a little more together. And then you figure out where the elbow is, and then you just use lines to put them together. And again, you can go afterwards, making them a little more dynamic. Now I'm putting in more like fingers and making everything look a little more human and less mannequin-y. Things to note here is that the knees for the older character are slightly above 5. Like they're kind of on 5, but a little slightly above. But for the younger character here, that's probably age range around 15, we have it slightly below the 5, right? But the hips are also, rather than on 3 in the first, they're on like 3.5, and then I'm going from like 3.5 to slightly below the 5 to know where the knee is. Another way to know, to kind of gauge where you want the knee is using that same technique I'm using with the hands, where I make sure I know the palms are below the waist. You know, some characters, again, some characters might be different. You see some characters where everything's kind of exaggerated, and the person's kind of like a Frankenstein character where the hands are almost touching the ground. So again, you feel free to do what you want, but usually they're below the waist, unless you want a character with fists and hands above the waist area. Completely up to you. But here, the technique of having the hand below the waist and knowing where the shoulder is, obviously, and then the elbow is just in between where the shoulders begin and where the wrist is. It's in between there, and that's where you gauge it. So similar thing here, we know where the ground is. The ground is at 7. So if we know where the character's hips or waistline starts, then we know that the knee is going to be anywhere in between where the waist begins and the ground. And once you know that, you can kind of like use lines to just really quick sketchy lines to then draw the thighs and draw the calf muscles and things like that. Here, as you'll notice, I'm not focusing on so much on the muscles. I'm more focused in this video with like the size and the proportions of body parts with regards to other body parts. And I'm just using the numbers on the side to kind of make it easier for you guys to know what's going on in my head, because usually, obviously, when I'm drawing my characters, I don't do all of this, but this is kind of like good practice for you to do, you know, maybe before you go into your own characters or your own stories, just so you're more comfortable drawing your characters, or at least drawing characters of different ages like this and different heights. So you're also keeping mind of the height. You see, sometimes I see people draw, say, like maybe they draw Apple Black fan art, right? But they draw Sano and he looks really tall and mature. Now, on one hand, that could have been on purpose, right? That could be on purpose, and they're just drawing like an older version of Sano, but still drawing it with the young Sano's clothes. Or it could be a stylistic choice, but to make the character look a little more mature than he currently is in the actual story. But sometimes I can sense that it could also be that the person is not good with differentiating all these, like the body proportions of a character with height and things like that. And so here, even though we're focusing on female characters, you can take some of these ideas and apply them to male characters, but it'll just be a little more careful with the waist, and you're freer on some other things, on some other areas where the shoulders can be a little more broad, could be just broader or just a little bit. The feet and the hands could be bigger just a little bit, just to mimic real life. Again, these are rules that can be broken, and you know, some of this stuff I'm almost making up for you guys to then view and kind of pick and choose what you want, what works for you, and see if it applies to your story. So here I'm drawing now the fifth not the fifth, the third character, but like maybe a 5-year-old age range. And the shoulders, you can see I've kind of reduced it. It's not as broad also. And as the character gets younger, that hourglass looks less like an hourglass, right? You know, females and males are harder to differentiate the younger the character is, unless you throw a buttload of makeup on one and you know, and not so much on the other. But again, it depends. Your female characters that have no makeup on, it's not a it's more like a feminine thing, or a traditionally feminine thing, not necessarily a gender thing. So here you can see that the hourglass for the 5-year-old, or at least about 5-year-old, kind of begins at the 3.5, and then you know, once I figure out where the waist is and I know where the ground is, you can then gauge where the knee is going to be, because it'll just be in the middle right there, right? And then you just use lines to kind of put things together. And you know, that line right there would just be the, you can say 4.9, but it could have been a 5, and that's just where the inner lines of the legs meet. Or you can have like a little thigh gap there. And then, you know, you're adding in the hands, but still keep in mind you do not want to add, you know, you don't want to broaden the shoulders too much, again, for female characters, right? You figure out what the hand's going to be, again, below waistline, and then you just kind of easy straight lines to just put them together. Kind of think of the characters as mannequins, basically. And then when you're turning them into fleshed out characters, just think, enter the mindset like you're playing dress up. You know, that's a little tip I can give. And also, the younger the character gets, the smaller, you know, most things get, like the feet and the hands and things of that nature. The head doesn't change size. The head also gets smaller, but you know, it doesn't get that much smaller. Sometimes the ears look significantly big, but it all depends on what style you're going for. Because you know, in some cases, if you're trying to be really realistic, you know, then I'd suggest you study like real images, real people, life drawings, real life, and that would also assist in your work. And I'll have a video coming soon where I talk a little bit about life drawing, because I took a life drawing class recently, and I can talk a little bit about, you know, maybe how that might have helped my drawing. But prior to that, I had taken no life drawing classes, and I just took life drawing, say, for the last 4 months. But prior to that, I had never taken a life drawing class. Now we're going into the younger character. Again, you see the head. I still had it. You know, you can make it smaller, but approximately still 1 inch, just like the rest. And just and I'm just using that ruler on the left to make the character shorter. So I'm going like 1 inch below each time. It gets a little trickier after this, because you know, then the head changes. The shape is not exactly 1 inch, and the character's like really small. Maybe, you know, baby. It gets after any characters younger than this, it gets a little trickier, because it gets trickier depending on your style. Let me put it that way. Especially if you're going for a more realistic feel. Babies will have a head a little smaller, and you know, their bodies. It's almost like 2 heads. Right? It's almost like 2 inches of stuff, right? So the way you drew the head, that's 1 inch. The rest of the body is almost just 1 inch. Again, depends on what you're going for. Maybe 1.5, maybe. And the body is a little more fleshy, and the arms are bent, but we're not drawing a baby. So here, the same rules applied when I was putting this together. And as you can see, for this like 5-year-old kid thing, it could have been a boy. You know, it gets a little trickier to differentiate, but depending on what you're going for, you could give this character a little more. You could give all the characters, maybe just increase that hourglass hip look, just to make it look a little more feminine. But you know, That's not always the case, especially with really younger characters. But you could do it. It's up to you. Especially with like anime stuff where you see a character that looks really mature, and when they tell you the age, oh no, he or she is like 15. Really? Really, Sway? Anyways, so at this point, you can kind of, here you can just use the rulers and the guidelines to create even more guidelines for you, and then put numbers right there, leave notes. I kind of adopt a similar style drawing storyboards. See, I put a note there for Knuckles, say at like 3.5. Similar things when I'm doing storyboards, where maybe when I storyboard a page, and rather than erasing the whole storyboard, if I have a better idea for a panel, and maybe I just want to invert one panel, I just circle on that actual page and just say, oh, invert this. And when I'm drawing the actual page, I just invert it, and therefore the actual page would just have that difference compared to the storyboard. And if you don't know what storyboards are and all that kind of stuff, I also leave links to videos. I have all sorts of videos that can help you if you're looking to get better at drawing art, doing comics. If you want to create your own comics, I have some videos that even help you with regards to writing. Now back to this video. One of the last things I'll say is, again, these are kind of like mannequins that you can manipulate and create whatever you want to create. So let's say if your character's a little thicker, you just put a little more flesh. Maybe make the thighs a little wider, or make if a character weighed a lot, you could just kind of just beef things up, right? Everything will just be a little more fleshy. And I'd advise you study, look at actual real people, real images, and then try to morph this mannequin into that, and have that as a foundation for your style. And then you can start breaking the rules and having to come up with more unique and distinct aesthetics to your style. But at this point, you can then go further and explore whatever you want to explore. Here you can see me, I'm putting in the eyes. Here the eyes are a little more, they're still big, and they're kind of like anime eyes. Typically those anime eyes are just bigger than realistic eyes, just period, right? Even the small ones. But here you can see as the character gets younger, I kind of make the eyes a little bigger, just a little bit bigger each time, kind of almost making the character look a little more innocent, more childlike, and the heads get a little more rounder as the character gets younger as well. Like I said, the oldest character has the most defined jaw, but it gets a little rounder as the character gets younger. The character's cheeks pop out, like face cheeks, not butt cheeks. get a little more plumpier as the character gets younger, almost giving that little adorable look. The nose, the bridge of the nose for the character, again in this style, which is relatively my style, the bridge of the nose kind of also gets shorter, smaller-ish each time, as you will see, as I'll put that in there. And then I draw the lips. The width of the lips also gets smaller as the character gets younger. So this is not only like a body proportion kind of video, but it's also like the differences I have in my style when I'm drawing female characters at different ages. And now, as you can see, this character, I've decided to turn her into one of the characters from my series Apple Black. For those who don't know me, I'm the creator of Apple Black, published and serialized on Saturday AM. You can read the first 4 chapters free. I'll leave a link to where you can read that. Or you can purchase volume 1 with the first 9 chapters. I'll leave a link to where you can purchase that as well. But here I'm going to be drawing one of the characters from the series called Flo, Florine Mercury, but it's just short for Flo. And you're going to see me turn this model into Flo, and that's kind of the idea, where, and this applies to even when I'm drawing pages, where I draw kind of like a mannequin, and then after, because that's the hard part, trying to figure out the pose, figure out all that kind of stuff is a little more difficult than this. I'm just drawing characters standing in this video, but in like when you're drawing panels and you're figuring out the pose, you're figuring out the parts you want to show in the panel and the parts you don't. You have fingers all over the place, especially like action scenes. It can get a little complicated. So to make it a little more, to simplify it and make it easier for yourself, sometimes you kind of have to draw models, plain models, mannequin type figures in the poses you want. Once you figure out the pose you want, then you go into the details. The same idea is taken when you're drawing the pages themselves. You have that storyboard. It's kind of like the blueprint of how the page is going to look, and then you go in drawing the page based off what you came up with the blueprint. The blueprints are easier to edit because they're just like simple thumbnail sketches, or if it's a full paper, a little name kind of thing, name, whatever. They're easier to edit because they're just in pencil. It's easier to edit that than to actually finish a page, ink a page, color it, and then maybe you don't like, oh man, you don't like how that panel looks on the left. You want to change the whole panel. It's way more difficult. So the same idea applies here, where you figure out the hardest parts, figuring out the pose, blah 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 blah, and then you add in details. And adding in details, that's easy, right? Because you know what the character's wearing already. You're just dressing them. You're just playing dress up. So that's what you're going to see me do here for Flo. And that's pretty much it for this video. You'll be able to compare Flo, and this kind of works pretty well because Flo is kind of like around that age of like around 20, so maybe 20, 21, 19, which is what I am the model I'm using to do dress up for Flo. So this works perfectly, and I'm adjusting things accordingly with regards to her clothing. And then when I'm done, that's it for this video. If you have any questions, please leave comments in the comment section below. If you have any comments at all, questions, whatever, I'll be more than happy to answer them as best as I can. Don't forget to check out Saturday AM, where Apple Black is published and serialized. They can check out all the other comics that are there as well. We also have something where we're kind of looking at submissions with Summer of Manga, and I'll leave links to where you can check that out as well, so you can end up being in the magazine. You can think of the magazine as like a Shonen Jump. But yeah, you'll be able to check out the magazine and check out all the other cool comics on the magazine. You got Clock Striker, Bullet Eater, Saigami, and all the other cool things there. Paradise Down, Soul Beast, and which kind of kicks off Summer of Manga, which I was talking about. But again, all the details to all of that you can check in the description below. Don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe. And also don't forget to hit the bell so you stay notified each time I upload a video. This video is kind of fun. It's been long since I did a tutorial kind of like this. And there is more to come. And if you're interested in me doing this for males, it wouldn't be that much different. But if you're interested in seeing it anyway, you can leave comments below. I'll be bringing back some of the character design videos that I used to do. I just went a little bit on hiatus when it comes to those because of how hectic my schedule has been. But yeah, I'm making a comeback, guys. There's a lot of video ideas I want to execute, so hopefully you guys stick around to see me execute them. Again, don't forget to subscribe, like, leave a comment if you have any questions. Share this video to people you feel that would be interested in this kind of stuff. And yeah, that's why Manga, and I'm out.